Good Friday evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Nobody Asked Me Guy show. Listen, what I should say, our topic last week was on diversity, and we talk a lot about that on this show. However, there were so many questions that we were getting as we were getting ready to close, and individuals were concerned about diversity in politics, and there are so many terms for diversity, and there's so much conversation about diversity and how diversity works. So we asked not only Dr. Shindale Seal to return and further the discussion, we also asked Mr. Reg Copicus to return as well. And they both will be joining us momentarily. However, while we're waiting on them to join us, we just want to kind of give you an update on exactly what we'll be talking about this evening. And this evening's topic is diversity in politics and its effect on the masses, good, bad, or indifferent. Now, as we know, there are so many, again, there's so much conversation about diversity and about people and about hatred and white privilege and affirmative action and reverse discrimination. And, the list is exhaustive. It is an inexhaustive list because sadly, too many human beings do not want to accept the fact that as we so loquaciously like to boast about our Christianity, especially in America, and about our belief systems and all of that, we seem to conveniently always forget that those that like to boast about that, it talks very simply from Genesis about how the earth was formed, if you believe that. It talk about how Adam came about, if you believe that. It talk about how Eve came about, if you believe that. So when we profess to have this innate dogmatic understanding of Christianity, but we mistreat other human beings, then there's a great divide there. There's a great sense of being disingenuous. Can we share that? Because last time I checked now, people love to talk about John 3:16. For God so loved the world, for God so loved the world, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. And I'll just leave it there because I don't want you to say we're on here preaching, but you guys know the rest of that passage. But we seem not to be able to grasp that, we being far too many of those that profess that we believe in the Bible and that we follow the Bible. So as we talk about diversity today, as I said, Dr. Shindale Seal will be joining us momentarily. Mr. Reg Copicus, who both are diversity specialists in their own endeavors with corporate academics, many workshops across the country. They both have vast experience in meeting audiences and talking about diversity. I too have been have worked very heavily in that area. So it just is a topic that needs to be discussed in detail. Come on in, Dr. Seal. It's a topic that needs to be discussed in detail. And we have so many people, unfortunately, that try to bounce around the topic and try to pretend that they don't understand what it is that we are discussing. So, guys, Dr. Seal is now joining us. We're still waiting on Dr. Seal. Good
Hi,
evening.
how are you?
Listen, I am great. And
I
yourself?
am doing very well. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No. Thank you for being here. Reg Copicus is running a
Okay.
little late,
I think
and I was
we're
just
all
kind of
falling
giving
short
out.
today.
Yes, we are, and I'll just kind of give my audience a little
Okay.
intro, a re-intro, and Dr. Seal, I have to warn you, my audience has never seen me with my '70s look, with my
Oh,
'70s
that's all
afro,
right. It's a nice throwback.
and I decided, I decided, yeah, that's exactly what it is. I decided to let them experience my '70s. Of course, it's much shorter right now, but that's
That's all
another
right. Yeah, that's
topic.
another
But
day.
but Yeah, yeah. But Dr. Seal, we have a lot of returning, as always, a lot of returnees, and I was simply sharing with them is the fact that there's so many. Let me just say, so dichotomously diversity and so many things out there, and I did share with our audience, if you'll allow me, audience, to just kind of bring Dr. Seal up to snuff about that whole Christianity thing, and those of us pretending that we are such staunch Christians, but we seem to forget very simply about the very first book in the Bible, about Genesis and how the world was formed, and how Adam came about and how Eve came, the whole nine. So anyway, we were just talking about human beings in general. So let me stop babbling for a moment, Dr. Seal, and if you do not mind, if you just kind of give us a brief update again of who you are and what you do. Of course, as I said, we always have returning viewers; they know who you are, but our new viewers do not know who you are and what you do.
Okay, well, my name is Dr. Seal, Dr. Shandell Seal, and I am the CEO of Seed Coaching and Consulting, which is a diversity strategy company that provides diversity strategy, implementation, talks, all kinds of things for organizations that need some help in that particular area, which just about all of them do. What I do is more along the psychological component of it all, because we all realize that when we start doing diversity work, that a lot of people start feeling a little bit anxious, and they tend to get resistant when we start, pushing certain numbers and start trying to get some initiatives going. So I work heavily in making sure that those particular groups find their way to helping us succeed in those diversity strategies. I also am the CEO of a nonprofit organization called Our Community Mentors. And what we do is we bring academic, professional, and quality of life resources to marginalized residents here in South Los Angeles. And we do that usually by doing career days at schools, bringing professionals of color to students of color so that they can actually see it, and now then they can be it, right? So we walk them through a day in the life and things of that nature. So it really brings a sense of connectivity for students who would not normally have access to professionals who look like them. I'm also a professor. I teach leadership, business, culture at one of the universities here in Los Angeles. And I am excited to be here. That's what I do.
Wow, that's fantastic. And, we're happy that you're here. And, if as I said to our audience here, and guys, while we're waiting on Reg Kopicus, Reg is a diversity trainer. He does various things, and we'll let Reg talk to you about that once he comes on. However, we do not want to prolong the process. Now, Dr. Seal, I know last week you had given us some insight as to diversity and a definition for diversity, and we know that there are so many pieces to the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about resistance to diversity, would you please elaborate? Obviously, for many of our listeners, that's self-explanatory. We understand resistance, but in your endeavor, in your walk, as you do the workshops, as you work on building self-esteem in our young people, etc., when they encounter, maybe I should say, the resistance, when there's an attempt to, quote, diversify their thinking, do you find that that's a difficult walk to get them to a point where they can actually self-actualize and truly understand what diversity is and what it means?
Well, so diversity, just the whole term, it really incites, it's a visceral emotion for some people. So when you have a group that has been dominant forever, it's really difficult for them to conceptualize that in this space that they have dominated, now we're opening it up, or we're trying to open it up to include people who in their minds have not earned that spot. And so it becomes a zero-sum situation where, oh, okay, well, if these people come in, then that means that they're going to try to take over, or if these people come in, they're going to take my job, or why, how do they get to earn this? Because I've worked so hard. And so there are a lot of emotions that come about. Additionally, and this is actually what I've been seeing quite often is a sense of ownership of space and ownership of that privilege of being the one selected or being the one even thought about. So if you are, and this is where the whole affirmative action, the fights in affirmative action have come about, in that we as a dominant culture, whoever that dominant culture may be, we are the originators. We own this thing. Why does our space have to be shared with these people, these groups of people who are not, in their minds, capable of being here? And in many cases, they are right. They're right, because they have, if you have a game, right? So we have the nobody asked me game, and you've created it. So now you are the master of that game. Well, the other people who are playing the game are saying, well, hey, you know what, let's let some other people in. But they don't know the rules of the game. You have created this game. So you know top to bottom how to work that game. I, coming in, don't have a clue. I have to learn, as I hit the ground. So now you've got people coming in who don't necessarily know this game, who don't necessarily understand how to play it. And this has been the Black experience in America forever, right? We have been visitors. We have been unwelcome guests in this game that we have not learned necessarily and have not been allowed to learn how to play. And my position has been that that's fine. Keep your game. I'll make my own game in my own community, and that will serve my community well. So, but the issue there now is reliance. We've been programmed from the time Black people have entered America to rely on those who have been our masters, to rely on those who've been our oppressors, more so than to rely on people who look like us. And it has been documented throughout, politically, legislatively, health-wise. When you go academics, forget about it. Everything it's been, and this is what we talk about, institutionalized racism. It has been literally injected, or it's actually been in the fiber of every single one of those components to keep us reliant on those who are who don't look like us, and who it's better served that we don't excel in their game. So that's my little analogy. But I think that when we talk about diversity and how people are feeling when we're starting to do those types of programs, it really, really is a fear. It's a sense of loss of control. And that's where that anxiety, that's where that resistance comes. The resistance comes in that, okay, I am not going to have control of this domain as I normally do. And so this is where, like, when we bring in people who are diverse, they remain in the lower rungs where there's no decision-making power. If you look at any organization right now, every single Fortune 500 company, not every single one, you probably have about 5 or so that have Black people on top, Black men on top, no women. So, Ursula Burns was amazing, but so now we have a situation where there are hundreds, maybe thousands of these organizations, but this is where our diversity is as far as Black people are concerned. So we need to look at a different game. We need to create a different game, and one that serves our communities in a way that we need to be served. So I often promote the self-reliant piece in creating jobs, opening up companies, opening up businesses that hire African Americans, nurses and doctors, the ones that I connect with, encouraging them to mentor young Black students to get into the field so that they can do the ultimate reach back and actually provide services to African Americans in marginalized communities, in the poorest of communities. Because honestly, had we had that in place, we would not have had as many deaths in this COVID-19 situation. And why I say that is much of the death that we talk about is not necessarily because they caught COVID, it's because they were denied service or because they were not provided with the ventilators that they needed or any of the, whatever it was, the services that they needed, based on the fact that a lot of our healthcare providers were trying to save ventilators and other types of materials and tests and all that for their community, for people within their racial group, under the guise of, well, their symptoms, the African American people's symptoms didn't seem to align with what COVID shows it to be, which everyone says it was clearly a COVID situation. So if we had people who really were committed to the health of the African American community, and as doctors, as nurses, as just healthcare providers, we would be in a much different situation. Additionally, our schools. And all of this is under the guise of diversity in politics, because politics, that whole civic situation, so significantly impacts our everyday existence in our neighborhoods. So when we look at schools, we have data, and we talked about this last week. There was a longitudinal study of 8,000 schools nationwide, and the study ended up resulting in the fact that African American male teachers are the most effective teachers for students at any level, in any socioeconomic area, at any race, any behavioral level. They top the charts. Yet they are the least represented in our academic system. So we look at all of these disparities. We look at what the data shows, but then we look at the disparities, and then we wonder, well, what is going on? What is the issue? And there are many issues. It's very complex. But when we talk about complexities and we see what has happened, now there's time that this is the opportunity for strategy to come in. This is where we should really take hold of, okay, we see that this COVID situation has uncovered a bevy of racial disparities in healthcare. What do we do about it? Instead of saying, hey, white people, why are you discriminating against us? Why aren't we saying, hey, Black people, let's create this thing for ourselves and let's make sure that this mess never happens again. Or if it does happen again, that we're on top of it and we're making sure that we're covered. This is where that breakdown for me comes in.
Beautiful, very, very well put. Listen, as you share that, and you certainly have hit the topic square on, diversity in politics and its effects on the masses, good, bad, and indifferent. And you've shown us all of the aspects of this entire process. When I have done some trainings with this Institute for Healing Racism in the state of Michigan. Mm-hmm. And as you're sharing what you share, I find it difficult many times when we talk about diversity and our less melanated friends and neighbors and some of us relatives try to pretend in a very condescending manner that they were not cognizant of these kinds of things. How do you address those individuals?
Well, when people claim ignorance, it's always interesting when you start delving into the things that they have seen that they have not connected. Let's put it this way. Attribution is an amazing thing. So when we talk about attribution, we say, okay, so you see this event, a police officer shooting an unarmed Black man walking down the street, but you don't attribute it to racism. You attribute it to this particular bad rogue cop, right? it was him individually that was a horrible road cop. Well, that's fine. I mean, you can attribute it to that. The issue now is then, now they're 5 in that area. Okay, but now they're 100. So are we saying that our police, that we've got a problem in the police department, that they're all rogue? Or are you saying that, well, I don't know what the problem, I can't even imagine that it could be all of these police officers that are shooting these Black men because they're Black? Because I don't see color. I don't see, I'm not a racist. I was raised to love everyone. Everyone is a child of God, right? So it's this denial of relating to or attributing these actions to race. And in reality, as Black people, we look at this and we say, well, of course he shot him because he was Black. White people look at it as, because they have been taught that racism is bad, but being able to distinguish behavior, quote unquote, is what we do. And it's the dirty little secret that they believe innately that these Black men deserved it, that these Black women deserved it. So in getting through that is pushing past this particular psychological and cultural barrier that a lot of them hold since they were, well, the research says that we start exhibiting racial bias at the age of 2. At 2, we start exhibiting that. So for this amount of time in their lives, they have actually had, this is what they've been doing. It is very difficult for them to say, okay, I see that was race, because there's this like this agreement amongst them that we would never say you're racist. It's almost as though you lose your white card if you say that this white person did something that was racist, because inevitably it would come back to them that they didn't do anything about it. So now this outs me. So this is a complete, protectorate type of behavior, and it is difficult. It is very, very difficult to push through. This is why a lot of the buy-in that we look for when we're doing this type of work in organizations, it really is a very long work. So usually this requires allyship. Like if you're doing it in an organization, we do a lot with allyship. And we do a lot with, okay, well, this is the behavior that we expect to be exhibited. I am going to tell you right now, diversity and inclusion and equity work does not change people's beliefs. It does not. It is meant to change their behavior at work, but it is not meant to change their beliefs. They are not going to go home to their racist wife or their racist husband or their racist friends or their, ambivalent, community and start becoming Martin Luther King. Like, they're not going to do that. They're not going to go back home and they're not going to fight for the rights of Black people. They're not going to go back home and they're not going to hold their friends accountable when their friends say something racist. They're not going to do that. Just, you need to, just accept it. That's the resolve. What we do work toward is getting the people who are in that group, who are either ambivalent to the racial disparities that occur in the workplace, or the people who are blatantly like, yeah, I don't like Black people, or I don't like whatever. There are very few of those who would actually admit it, right? But the behavior is there. What we work toward doing is making sure that they understand the actual legality of equity, or the actual legality of diversity and civil rights within their organization. So it's policy. Is actually pointing to getting the organizations to get this diversity and inclusion initiative or purpose or value, whatever they want to call it, in their policy, so that if people breach that, now we can deal with that on a disciplinary level or a training level. Honest truth be told, the people who are actually trying to put it into the policies, they themselves aren't really buying it. but it's great for optics. It's a great marketing ploy. So this is, it's a big challenge. It really, really is a big challenge. Race is everything in the United States. Race is everything in all of our European countries. Race is everything, and it is meant to ensure that capitalism moves on. It is meant to ensure that those who are on top, who look like each other, that homogeneous pool, remain there. Why would a white person who is in power give you the resources to compete with them for their power? They wouldn't. It makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense.
You know, that's man, now you're talking about pensive explanation. That's, but see, as you share that, I please allow me to share a question with you and our audience that I ask all of my less melanated brothers when sharing information along with my melanated brothers, because a lot of people do not want to have conversations and they do not want to face the real issues. But here's a question, and I would like your opinion on that question. And I hope Reg joins us soon. As a matter of fact, Reg is from Canada. Reg is one of our less melanated brothers, and I want him to share with us as well. But here's a question that I love
too with the indigenous folks there, so that their situation is very interesting.
Yes, yes, and I love to ask this question, and the reaction that I get, I'm being honest with you, it's just gasp and that kind of thing. So anyway, the question is to me, this question is, it is well documented that most people believe that Columbus discovered America in 1492. Then I put, of course, in quotes, white people. Now landed here, that white people landed here shortly after. Now you've had in excess, and I make it clear to my less melanated brothers that I'm asking them this specific question. I said, you've had in excess of a 500-year start when referencing to people that look like me as being apes and non-humans and does not have the academic capacity to perform. And then I always hit them with this. Why are you not much further along than you are if minority people are your problem? Are you an underachiever? And that's where I leave the question. And I went on my responses.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But yes. I always call it a waste of their whiteness, right? If you are a white person, or less melanated, like you like to say, if you are a white person and you're not doing well in this society, it speaks to several issues. And this is where it gets really foggy, because when you have a group of white people who are underserved, right? So they are the most powerless of the white group, right? What's funny is that they're actually more powerful than the richest Black man. And it's because not all constituency members are created equal. So it is going to be, well, if it had not been for X, we would have done Y. And in reality, and this is why I said capitalism in the first place, right? Capitalism needs to have a large group on the bottom, working their tails off for the riches of the top, for the few at the top. This is where you got the 99 percenters, right? The 1%, the 99%. And then you have a lot of whites who are captured in the much lower rung of those percentages. And those are usually the ones that are the most adamant about what's happening with Blacks progressing, Blacks having the opportunity to go to college, and they don't, even though they don't want to, because most don't want to, and they have said that they don't want to. That is this liberal thing. You shouldn't need college for to get a job. You can work here and work there, but the problems are pervasive. Now, for them to not be as far along is basically the same thing that has happened with Black people, except for it's happened worse for us. They've been caught in that downward spiral of, okay, you have not, you have not taken on the opportunities that may have been afforded you, or you have been relegated to the lower rung, where you get to fight like crabs in a barrel with the other people who are, you know, in our group. So you're going to have a lot of, you're going to have people who are going to have to blame others for their lack of progress. Right now, we're having, the whole thing started with COVID, like, oh, okay, it was the Chinese. It's the Chinese who caused us this thing, right? Whites were just like totally just reaming them. They were just like, oh, this is you guys are the reason why we have COVID, blah, blah, blah. Then it shifted where the Chinese in China started blaming the Africans in China for COVID, because you need someone to blame. It can never be me. It's you. It's always you why I'm in the situation that I'm in. And then now here in, I don't know if it's happening in your states, but here in Orange County, now we've got a lot of our well-to-do white people blaming African Americans and Latinos for COVID, or for the reason why they are on quarantine. So it's always that shift of blame. We've not been taught to be accountable. We've not been taught to be responsible for not making the grade, not doing what we need to do in order to progress. And it's a human problem. It's not necessarily a black or white, it's a human problem. I need somebody to blame, so I will pick the most powerless person to blame. And the most powerless person in many of our situations are, you know, the minority groups. So you're going to have a whole lot of responses from white people when you start asking that question, and it's going to unnerve a lot of them. Well, if it weren't for these policies that you know, try to take the power away from hardworking Americans like myself, then I would have been much further along. Not mentioning that, okay, well, we adjusted from the industrial complex to, you know, a certain type of different economy. And then we moved into where we needed people with degrees, or people with a much more strategic understanding of business and complex thought to do certain types of jobs, which led to higher pay. Then we needed people who actually were into like more computer and tech savvy sectors who, you know, commanded a higher rate of pay, leaving those people who worked in the mines, worked in, you know, in the steel mills, who worked in farming or whatever behind economically. So it's not that blacks came in, because the blacks aren't taking your jobs. I mean, the Hispanics are not taking your jobs. Like the jobs that you have, they're not taking them. Right. So what is that argument? Why is that argument still there? It's so curious to me.
And, you know, as you share that, Dr. Seal, I'm even more stumped at people that look like you and I, that drink that same Kool-Aid. And as we're talking about diversity, when I see people like Ben Carson and other individuals that sit up and spout the same kind of nonsense when it comes to disenfranchised, it's always that vitriol that's spewed at those of us that are, quote, less financially fortunate. You know, I say those of us because I put myself in the category with all of us. And I as an educator, as an entrepreneur, as a business person, and that's another topic that we talk about at another time. Being a business person and entrepreneur, by the way, that's another topic. But you know, I find, unfortunately, even those, and dare I use the word brothers, that are doing quite well in the financial arena, many of them will share that same analogy. Is that, other people, black people, they don't want to do this, they don't want to do that, they won't do this, they won't do that, and try to lump everybody in a category, because, like I used to hear my grandmother say, he no longer eats syrup sandwiches, he can now eat a sandwich with some meat. Right. What do you say to those of us that that seem to get have that mentality at times?
Well, that mentality is across the world. It is time honored. It has gone on forever. You wallow in it. You wallow in it, and then you reach up, and then those people that are there, they're terrible. I don't know what's wrong with them, right? And it is by sheer luck that you've actually gotten to where you are, but you don't recognize that. But in order to separate yourself from what you have always detested, you have to have that conversation with yourself and with everyone else that you meet about why those people are where they are. And we see it a lot because as a successful African-American person in America, you need to identify with other people who you deem as successful as well. And the people who you deem as successful as Carter Woodson put it in his book, The Miseducation of the Negro, you have gone from you've been trained by this dominant culture by whites to detest and hate blacks for any reason, in any black institution for any reason. So if I am an African-American educated or very elite high earner, I am now not going to subject myself to a startup or a new African-American entrepreneur simply because he's not at the level that I'm at. And I wouldn't be associating with someone at that level because he doesn't have the thought process of somebody at my level. And the reality is what your job is at this point is to train him on the skill set that would put him in a position to get to where you are.
Absolutely.
Is what keeps us so divided, because the master to whom that rich person is beholden does not look like that. They are beholden to a master that detests him and where he comes from. There's a deceased educator, Paulo Freire, and this book that he wrote, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, right? And in it has a quote. It says, "The oppressed become the oppressor." So when you have been oppressed for so long, when you have lived in the dredges for so long, and you've watched the white person become like rich, or you see how they live and they're balling and they're this and they're that, that's what you dream about. That's what you always aspire to, right? This is what I'm gonna make this money and I'm gonna be this and I'm gonna be that. And then once you get it, you can't stand what it was that you were. You try everything about what you were is horrible and it's awful and it's ugly. And the people you knew, they're not elevated. Is all of these things that we use to separate ourselves. And it's not just Black people, but it is oppressed people. It is minorities. It is marginalized groups. And we've seen it the world over, because when you do international or global diversity studies, you see this where you have dominant and minority groups, and the minority groups have a certain character and behavior once they have attained. And that attainment, it reveals a certain character. It reveals what they've been aspiring to for so long and who they want to emulate. And they want to emulate the people who have oppressed them, historically. So this is, it is not exclusive to us, but because this is our context right now, we see it very, very prevalently.
And sadly, all of the time. It's very interesting that you would share that, because as bad as I hate to, I have to say I have been very blessed to have encountered those individuals that have done extremely well financially, that understand that, hey, as you said, it was luck, thank God. While the exact opposite attitude has befallen some of the other individuals that have been in the same situation. And I'll be very honest with you, I just as a human being, I find that very difficult to swallow, because it's like anything, with me as a male. I have no tolerance for domestic violence.
Okay.
I have no tolerance for excuses that men try to use for slapping women. I have no tolerance. And I say to my wife all the time, I've said to women I've dated all the time, having been, quote, a star athlete, Golden Glove boxer, star football player, all of that, I said, when you are around, quote, what many people think are real men, and then when you really start separating the real men that are not only is he an alpha male at his sport, but he's an alpha male all the way around, then you really start to learn what a real man is. And I say to them all the time, even when I'm doing prep talks, is that this same guy that you reference because he's a star athlete or he's a star this, that, or the other that beats women, he's a coward. They say, oh, how can he be a coward? He's a boxer, he's a this, he's a that. Because he's protected in those things. He's protected on the football field. If it gets too rough, somebody's going to throw a flag and blow a whistle. If he's in a boxing ring, his corner is going to throw in a towel, or the official is going to stop. But when you're on your own and you know that the cavalry is not coming, that's when you know. And I share that analogy because of what you've just shared with the way the oppressed will flip and become the oppressor. And that's why when I talk about diversity, and that's why I'm happy to be speaking with you, I find difficulty as a human being, I find difficulty as an individual to process how does one not process that his/her job is to elevate and to give a hand up.
Well, but that has been bred into Black people from the start, right? From the time the emancipation happened, from the time slaves were freed, it was okay. Now we, the government, or we, the state, now we'll get our people to take care of you, because we're not going to let you, we're not going to give you the necessary resources to do what you need to do. We'll give it to you. And then the states decided, no, we don't want to give it to you. You're on your own. And so what happened there is you leave one master, because for those years, right? Hundreds of years, they're slaves. You have a master who took care of everything for you. You had to ask to do this. You had to ask to do that. Well, now you're emancipated. What does emancipation mean? Slaves weren't trained on how to manage a household with finances, and they didn't understand like what schooling was necessarily about, and they didn't have any of the necessary components of survival for a new group of people trying to make it into this world. So and instead of providing these necessary resources or training, they were kind of said, no, we'll do that for you. Or, you're going to have to jump on and become a sharecropper or whatever. And we'll give you, what we think you should have. You are still reliant on that master. You are still reliant on this nation that is not providing for hundreds of thousands of people who have never had these opportunities to move forward or to do anything. So I'm not going to give you schooling, and whatever schooling I'm going to give you is going to be completely deficient of anything that you could ever need to move forward in this world. Because whites at that time, and especially in the South, had no intention of helping Black people who yesterday you were my slave and now you have to be my equal. I mean, it's ridiculous to think about. And still is. And still is.
Listen, I was born and bred right here in the Jim Crow South. Please continue. Please continue.
Still the same. It's still the same. So this is why, and I talk about this all the time with regard to education. This is why, even to today, the disparity in education continues, because I am going to give you just enough education to make sure that you can do the jobs that I need to keep you in. I will never give you the education that you need in order to compete with me or in order to overtake me professionally or academically. I would never do that. This is why I said initially that the whole affirmative action thing is where white people were complaining that Black people getting into an organization, they're not as equipped as they need to be in this job, because they know that we did not prepare you to be in this job, and we continue to make sure that you're not prepared to be in this job. They're right. We know that this is happening as Black people. What are we doing about it? Instead of asking people who don't want to give us these things to give us these things. Hey, I believe that Black Lives Matter. I believe that, the reparations should definitely happen. But the reality of that fight is that my energies could be better suited elsewhere in building up the community so that they don't need reparations. My energies could be better suited where we're coming together and saying, okay, yeah, reparations should happen, but until that happens, we're doing this over here and making sure that our young men can get jobs without being denigrated or without being, treated less than another person who does not necessarily look like them. We need to make sure that our young ladies have opportunities to go to school and not be beaten down by officers because they look a certain way, or because they look a little bit more mature than the other white girls, or because they speak a little bit louder. We need to create this for ourselves instead of asking people who don't want to give it to us to give it to us. Create it for you.
Excellent. Hey, this is a perfect place to stop. Excellent, excellent. As I've shared with our audience earlier, is that we're going to make a series of this, Dr. Seal, and you and I will be talking again. Unfortunately, I see Brother Kopika's never arrived here, and it would have been great to have him on. However, this was invaluable. This was very invaluable. And again, thank to our new guests. Thank you for joining us. We're so happy that you're here. Dr. Shindell Seal, if you will tell our guests how they may contact you, please.
Oh, sure. You can contact me through my website at seadecc.com. seadecc.com, or you can email me at shindale@seadecc.com. That's SHINDALE@seadecc.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so very much, Dr. Seal. Guys, you can come. Well, I'm happy to say that I'm finally revamping my website. So you can't get me there right now because it's under construction. But I tell you what, I can be more personal. 440-935-0374, 440-935-0374, and or contact me at the Nobody Asked Me Guy Show at gmail.com, all lowercase, the Nobody Asked Me Guy Show at gmail.com. And again, it's coming up to Mother's Day, guys. Just want to remind you, get that book, Mothers and Their Men, an introspective look at mothers rearing their sons. It's not a book to try to tell you how to rear your kids. It's a conversation that you might want to have. So listen, guys, it's been great having you here. And just as you did last week, we know every time we get off air, somebody will send me some questions. So feel free to do the same. I see that you guys, Dr. Seal knocked it out of the park again. Nobody asked any questions. She was very explicit, wasn't she, guys? Yes, very explicit, and answered everything great. So Dr. Seal, thank you so very much for being here again with the Nobody Asked Me Guy Show. And please allow me to invite you back with one of your, the co-host next week. I'm having Byron Lars of Byron Beauty Mark. Some people may be familiar with Byron, some may not. Cicely Tyson, First Lady Michelle Obama, Taraji P. Henson, Angela Bassett, and the list goes on. Byron do designs for them, as well as many people ask about black dolls, etc. Byron is the first commissioned African-American fashion designer to do Barbies over 20 years ago. And we're going to have Byron on. So if you get an opportunity, guys, go to Byron Lars Beauty Mark and you will see his designs, etc. So again, we want to invite you back for next week. Same time, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Dr. Seal,
Yes.
we are eternally grateful.
Oh, thank you. It's been truly a pleasure.